So here's the story. We ended up last time, in the last year, that the rabbi begins talking about the special nature of Hebrew, the Hebrew language. And in a sense, it's a very polemical position to take at the time. Why? Because one of the major arguments that Arab Muslims use as proof for the validity of Islam and the Quran is the beauty of Quranic Arabic. Okay? And they say that if you spoke Arabic, you would see that no human being can replicate the beauty of the Quran. That's what they claim. And this idea was brought at the beginning of the Kuzari, and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi dealt with it very simply, saying, since I'm not a native Arabic speaker, I can't evaluate it, so essentially you have no evidence. I just have to take your word for it, and that's not a good argument. Therefore, it was dismissed, and he moves on. But now he's coming and making an argument that Hebrew is the the noblest of languages, and it has a holy aspect to it, and it is unprecedented. There is no other language in the world like Hebrew. Now, so that's what we're going to spend most of this shiur talking about. And for those who are watching at home, we will not be doing the entire section because most of us who are listening to this shiur are not experts in Hebrew grammar. Now, there is one person here who is an expert in Hebrew grammar that would be able to appreciate this, but he doesn't know the difference between 30 cows and 28 chickens. So therefore, we're going to skip this section. That was a test. So your Hebrew skills obviously are... Because if you would have translated to Hebrew, you would have known.
Probably not.
Yeah, when you translate to Hebrew, it's done. Because you're not saying the number 8, you're saying 8, and then for you catch it. So... So let's start. The language was affected by the difficulties or the vicissitudes of Jewish exile. We are at the 12th century at the time that this book is being written. The Jews are spread throughout the known world, approximately from India all the way to France and Italy. There aren't Jews yet in significant numbers living in Eastern Europe. That happens a little later. But there are Jews in Germany, and maybe a little bit into Poland, a little bit. It's not, those communities develop a little later, not just yet, as far as I know. And so most Jews are living under either Christendom, which is the Christian empire, which is divided between different kingdoms, or they are living under what is called the Islamicate, the various kingdoms or empire or caliphates that control most of the Middle East, North Africa, and also into Central Asia and into India, into that area. Spain is part of Europe. So by the 12th century, much of Spain has already been freed by the conquistadores, right? They did a pretty good job
By like the 10th
pushing.
century they started, right?
Well, they never stopped. 711, when they lost essentially most of Spain, that's when they began. So they were fighting from the get-go. There was a seasonal battle, and sort of the border keeps switching and changing. So most Jews are speaking another language. That's their native language is not going to be Hebrew. Jews who are living in Egypt and Yemen are speaking Arabic. Jews who are living in Spain are either speaking Arabic or speaking whatever the vernacular, which is somewhat like Spanish. The Jews who are living in Italy are speaking early form of Italian. And the Jews who are living in France, for example, are speaking French, as you see from Rashi quoting French words many times. And the Jews who are living in Germany are speaking German. And the Jews who are living in Iran and Afghanistan are speaking the various dialects of Persian. And why is that important to us? Well, I want to make a side point that I think we as English speakers have a benefit, have a leg up that, for example, native speakers don't have. When all of the Rishonim, you name the Rishon, pick a name, they learned Torah in a different language than Hebrew. Okay?
Like former translation.
Well, I'm going to explain so you don't make that mistake. Which means that when they were sitting in a class being taught, the language of instruction was not Hebrew. The language of instruction was either French or German or Spanish or Arabic. Just like at Ohr Somayach, the language of instruction is English. Everybody looks at the same text. That is, what they had in front of them, they had a Mishnah, they had Gemara, they had, let's say, a Rambam, if we're talking about after the Rambam, if they had a Rif. Whatever those texts were written, and they were written in what we call today Lashon HaKodesh. But the language of instruction was a different language, which required translating not only the words, but the principles and the concepts from one language to another. The transmission of this information, when it's transmitted in writing, was usually done in Hebrew. But we have plenty of works that are not in Hebrew. Torah commentaries in Arabic. Who would have thunk, right? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, even if you go back to the Second Temple period, in the yeshivas at that time, would they have been speaking Aramaic instead of Hebrew? And if so, when? That's hard
to know.
Yeah.
That's hard to know. For the Tanoim, their language was Hebrew. So when Jewish people returned to Eretz Yisrael and the language became Hebrew here, and yeshivot switched from Yiddish, right? The Litvish yeshivot were in Yiddish, and then they switched to Hebrew. At some point that happened here. I think it's going back all the way to the time of the Mishnah. The Amoraim used Aramaic. We see it. So they had another language through which the language of instruction. They were all fluent in Hebrew, but the language of instruction included another language. And so Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is talking about that, which means that the level of language among the ordinary Jew on the street is different than it was at the time of the Bible, let's say. It's different than the time of the Tanoim. So keep that in mind as what we're going to say. So he says that we can show that Hebrew is the noblest of languages, and he has two pieces of evidence. One is the Masorah. The Masorah is our tradition of transmitting teachings from generation to generation. And another one, what he calls a rational argument. And what's the Masorah? The Masorah is that when God revealed himself to Adam and Eve, right? It was Adam and Eve, right? What language did he speak to him? Afrikaan? Did he say, how's it to them? Or what did he say to them? Kakdila? What did he say to them? He spoke to them in Hebrew. Which means that the lashon, the language that God used, is his interaction with human beings, is Hebrew. And what did Adam and Chava speak to one another? English? Yiddish? Hebrew. They spoke Hebrew to one another. Yes?
I recall hearing somewhere, and I don't know if it's true, that Adam played some part in naming things. Like,
It's the Torah says it.
so okay, so it is true. So when God spoke to Hebrew, when God spoke Hebrew to Adam, wasn't a complete language yet? Like he let Adam make up some things as well, or?
No, what Adam did was he gave names to animals. And the names, as we say, that a name represents the essence of of whatever it is. So what's your Hebrew name?
Shlomo.
So that is your essence. Shlomo. Peace. Shalem. Perfection. Yehuda, right? The essence of his name is Yehuda. Okay? Which comes from the root of Hodah, of being grateful. Yeshaya, right? His essence is, from that name, is to bring Yeshua to the world.
Say that again. What is Shia?
Yeshaya is from the word Yeshua, redemption.
What if your Hebrew name is Yeshaya?
It's the same name.
Also Yeshua.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're not doing, not like, do me. I'm not doing you. If you want, see me after class. Like his name. Right? Moshe. Moshe, the Torah tells us that who gave Moshe his name? Who was she?
She was the Bat Pharaoh. She was the daughter.
Well, speak in English.
She was the
Don't.
daughter of Pharaoh.
She was the daughter of Pharaoh. She's the princess.
Princess, yeah.
So she called him Moshe. Why? Because I drew you, I pulled you out of the water. So, if you think about it, she doesn't call him he who was drawn out of the water, but he who draws others from the water. She is telling him, your essence is to go and help other people. Moshe is the one that pulls people out. Not that he was pulled out.
Lamash is to draw.
Mashat. So the name plays a role in our being. Right? You don't call somebody Eitan if he's like, 5'2", weakling, Like, Eitan is a name for like Andre the Giant, this big strong guy who's ready, That's the guy you call Eitan. Eitan means strong, like a rock.
What is her name?
Chazak was
Hmm?
strong. Chazak, I thought was strong.
The Hebrew has synonyms, like every language.
What's the Rabbi?
Are you trying to, make fun of me in front of the camera? I got you, Jasper.
What's the Rabbi's name?
What's my name? You don't know what my first name is?
First name.
What's my first name?
What's the meaning?
What's the meaning? What's the meaning of your first name? A path between two mountains. Oh. Pshaw. But it could be interpreted as a kitzur for three names. That each letter of Gimel and Aleph and the Yud is an acronym to Gur Aryeh Yehuda.
What does that mean?
That is the lion cub of Judah. So, want to mess with me?
didn't want to mess with you before.
You're still trying to figure out how do you get how many chickens?
Imagine.
It's like, but cows don't eat chicken. Yes, they do. If you treat them right, they'll eat anything. I want to go. I want to move forward. So, he says there is aspects of the language that names come from words. For example, what's the name of the first human being? Adam. Where did he come from? Adama. Adama is the feminine of Adam. Adama. So why isn't she called Adama? Because she wasn't made from Adama. She wasn't. Which is, by the way, you should know, the Medrash, it's a Medrash, so don't get mad at me, guys. The Medrash asks, why is it that men forgive easily and are willing to accommodate and go along with what a woman wants, and women are like this, they don't? So the Medrash says, simple. A woman was made out of a bone, and you were made out of mud. Mud, you can sort of, it's more, But a woman's made out of a bone. She can't bend. What?
Very profound.
But it's emes. But always you want to think about, when you get to those issues of, should I give in, not give in, just ask yourself the following. If you live till 120, do you want them to say in your funeral, and he never gave in to her no matter what? He was stubborn. Is that what you want them to say in your funeral? That's going to make your world to come better? I had to use that line on somebody. She was telling me, this woman, we were stuck waiting for buses. Anyway, we had like a whole mishigas. So she was telling me that she has issues with her husband, Shlom Bayit, and her husband's not speaking to her. So because he's not speaking to her, she's not speaking to him. And she says, shouldn't he bend down? I said, listen, I don't know, he's not here, I can't hear his side. If I hear only one side, I can't make up, my mind as to who's right and who's wrong. I don't know. You might be right, you might be wrong. But just ask yourself, if you were 120 and it's in your funeral, is that what you want them to say? That you didn't give in? That when he was obstinate and stubborn, you did not give in and you showed him? I left it at that. Because her answer was, well, I'm not dying. I didn't say that. So then I saw her, that was like on a Wednesday or something. I saw her the following week. So she told me, I gave in. I said, good, Baruch Hashem. She gave in. So, language, the words in Hebrew, names come from verbs, from concepts. Kain comes from kaniti, acquiring. Noach comes from Yenachamenu. There's an aspect and connection. And we have a testimony that goes 3,500 years. That the Torah and its language is passed down from generation to generation. Now it's true that because of our historical experiences, we've lost certain aspect of Hebrew understanding. That's true. It's true. Certain names of animals in the Torah, we don't really know what those are. When there are identification of plants in the Mishnah or in the Gemara, sometimes we don't know what they are today because we don't have a continuous tradition on those specific things. But on what the Torah says, we do. Most of the books we know. There are words in the Tanakh that only appear once, and that's a little more difficult, but we rely on our Masorah to tell us what it is. And so, he says that the language went from Adam Arishon all the way to Ever. And from Ever, it kept going and was preserved until Avraham Avinu had this language. And although Avraham Avinu already spoke a different language, Aramaic, because in Ur Kasdim, the Chaldeans spoke Aramaic, that was their language, but he had both, so he was bilingual. And when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he had one language that was called Lashon HaKodesh, which was Hebrew, and also he maintained Aramaic. And we know that Yaakov Avinu also spoke Aramaic, because in Lavan's house, what do you think they were speaking? Dutch? No, Aramaic. Because you see, when Lavan was chasing Yaakov, when Yaakov left, right, and they built this monument, so Lavan calls it Yagal Sa'aduta, which is in Aramaic. And Yaakov says Gal Ed, right? Because to show that we are talking about the same thing. So we know that Lavan used Aramaic, so that was the language that he used. And Ishmael, the son of Avraham Avinu, took this Aramaic wherever he went, and from that, says Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, that's where Arabic comes from. And Arabic shares a lot of Aramaic and also the Hebrew, but it's a lot, I think it's a little closer to Aramaic than to Hebrew. And they function the same. They have a lot of common grammatical structures.
Hebrew and Arabic or Aramaic? And
All three. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. Yes, Yosef. It's like an auction. You move, I call on you. Boom. Yes, sir.
Yes, they are all three, and there are more Semitic languages, right?
Sorry?
Semitic.
Are there more Semitic languages? Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
There's Akkadian,
Akkadian. That was for example,
Ugaritic, Moabite.
for example, Akkadian.
Syriac is later, but yes.
Came at least linguists say that it came before Hebrew. Is that according to Judaism? Not,
Of course not.
No.
Of course not.
So Akkadian emerged from Hebrew? Or?
Probably. It had a lot of influence. It was much influenced by the Sumerian, which is not a Semitic language. Akkadian.
That's right. Sumerian is not an.
And it's not. Sumerian is a whole different. We don't know too much about Sumerian, but yeah, it's. Yes, sir.
Whenever I understand this concept, when Jewish person speaks Aramaic, the Malachim don't understand that language. Does it apply also to Gentiles as well?
So, first you have to understand what does that mean. Tosfos says it's not that really the Malachim do understand Aramaic; they just don't bother with it. Okay, so it's not a question necessarily of just understanding. So I don't think I'm avoiding your question, but I'm giving you a reason why I'm avoiding. I don't know. Really?
What?
It's not Q&A. There's a shear. So
We're asking questions.
I know, but you had like a bunch of them, and then I was like, okay, yes. Last one.
Well, do I only have one more? I guess that was the question.
No, that's for everybody. Last question.
When was the most recent time, if any, where people were speaking Hebrew colloquially?
Well, Jews always spoke Hebrew to one another. So when you have, let's say, Benjamin of Tudela traveling around the world, right, and he went all over, he got to India. You can read his travelogue where he tells you about different Jewish communities. He's speaking to other Jews in Hebrew. When Jews meet one another, they're speaking Hebrew. Like when a Jew comes from, let's say, Ashkenaz, from Germany, and he comes to Spain, he doesn't speak Spanish, so he's speaking Hebrew to other Jews. So there's a myth that Hebrew wasn't spoken for 2,000 years until the Tzionim, Eliezer ben Yehuda and others revived the language. That's not true. we have attestations of Hebrew throughout Jewish history. Jews wrote letters, right? Just letters of how you doing, what's going on. Not only religious language, but secular language. There's poetry in Hebrew, secular poetry, erotic poetry. We can't read it, unless you're in public with outside with cameras on you. So I don't think it was ever a situation when that there wasn't anybody speaking Hebrew. And there's a very beautiful Gemara in Masechet Shabbos. It's a very famous one, but I'm going to use it to make a point about Hebrew language. That there was a person came to Shammai and said, convert me to Judaism, but I only believe in one Torah, the written Torah. I'm not accepting this oral Torah business. And Shammai just threw him out. Said, we have two Torahs, the written and the oral. That's it. You don't want to? Out. So the same person went to Hillel. And he told Hillel the same thing. How many Torahs do you have? 2. I only accept the written. He says, okay, no problem. So you have to learn the written Torah, right? So he said, okay, can you read Hebrew? And I said, no. Okay. So he took a sheet of paper. And he wrote Aleph, Bet, Gimel, wrote the alphabet and taught him the alphabet. And then it says, review this, come back tomorrow. He came back tomorrow to Hillel. And Hillel wrote an Aleph and said, that's a Tav. Bet, told him that's a Shin. And he says, wait a minute. Yesterday you told me Aleph was an Aleph. Now you're telling me it's a Tav? So he says, you see, you believe me when I tell you what the words mean, what each letter sounds like? That is oral Torah. So believe me when I tell you that there's oral Torah to the Torah itself, to the written Torah. What's he saying? He's saying there is no written language could ever exist without an oral tradition accompanying it. And if you think about the Egyptian, right, ancient Egyptian, we saw the hieroglyphics. Nobody could understand what they were. Why? Because there was no oral tradition of telling you how to read it and what things mean, until they found the Rosetta Stone, which was hieroglyphics and
Greek.
and and Japanese. Let's try it. 30 cows, 20. Aaron, if there are 30 cows in the field and 28 chickens, how many didn't?
I remember you said this before.
Okay, said it.
What was the third language?
I don't remember. I think it's only for Greek and maybe Latin.
Yeah, I think
it was Latin.
I think it was Latin.
I didn't study hieroglyphics, so why would I need the Rosetta Stone?
It's all Greek.
I studied Greek, and it wasn't all Greek to me. But
Might have been cuneiform.
what?
Might have been cuneiform
What was?
on the third language.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
It's too long after.
Cuneiform of what language?
Hittite,
Hittite. I don't know. I have to check. I'll have to check. For all of you with your phones, I don't know why you're Googling and not checking this out right now. Because there's no Wi-Fi down here. No service. Hey, because you don't tip the servers. Okay. Said it. Hebrew is required to be special, more special than any other language. Why? Argues because of prophecy. What is prophecy? Prophecy is translating the will of God into a vision, and the vision has to be translated into words. Okay? So just imagine God's will, right, is in a sense infinite. That has to be reduced, whatever that means, to a vision that the prophet sees. And that vision needs to be translated to what? To an idea. And then that idea needs to turn from idea to words and then come out as words and writing on a scroll. It's a reduction and a reduction and a reduction and a reduction. Tzimtzum, which means you need a language that is capable of allowing the will of Hashem to be in these words that we're reading in the Torah, that we're reading in the book of Joshua, the book of Isaiah, Job, Psalms. What that is, essentially we are filtering and we put this in this one word. And through that word, we need to collect those words and able to get back to what Hashem really wants. So Hebrew has to have the essential functionality to house prophecy. Because God communicates in Hebrew.
Just the versatility of the language.
Yes. And it needs to be very precise. And it needs to allow for metaphors and parables. It needs to have a lot of flexibility. Has to do very elastic, but the elasticity has to be understood correctly. It cannot be ambiguous, because then you don't know what Hashem wants. Well, what does He want by this? Well, it could be this. Then what am I supposed to do? I don't know, ask Shai. So you go to Shai and ask him and he'll tell you. So he says there's no way that the language would not contain everything needed to communicate the vision of God to this world. The kings of David HaMelech, Shaul, Shlomo, used this language. Moshe Rabbeinu used Hebrew. And you find that the Jewish people love speeches of rebuke. Why do we love it? Because we maintain them and pass them on from generation to generation. We are the only nation that maintains and transmits all of our bad transgressions from generation to generation. We don't erase anything. Every child knows what we did with Egel HaZahav, with the golden calf. Everybody knows in Parashas Chukah that the people got mad at Hashem because they had enough of the man and they wanted something different. And Hashem had to punish them. We don't hide our past. And we don't throw phones on the ground to tell the rabbi we're almost done. See, he's still smiling. I told you. And so, the Torah also uses terms for items that are not very common. All of these pieces and vessels in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, nobody uses these words. And yet the Torah has all of them. And it had all the right terms to explain to us exactly what the purpose is from the tabernacle. And there's names for the nations and the birds and the rocks and everything. And look at the beauty of the praises of God in the songs of David. And the arguments of Eov when he argues against his friends. And the rebuke of Ishaiah, the prophet. And all of the things that he promises us what will happen to us in terms of reward and punishment. Have you ever read that book? You should read it.
Spare copy?
Do I have a spare copy of the book of Isaiah? Do I have one? Yes. Do you want an English one?
Yeah.
There's a big, fat, green Tanakh book. Tanakh book, and it's in there. I'm happy to point it out to you and start. Isaiah is unbelievable. It's not easy. It's not easy. He was a real deal. So let's stop here because it's almost mincha time. We'll continue on Sunday.